that right now and told me to go home and wait. Ultimately, it took weeks for me to pass my pregnancy at home, and I was absolutely terrified. This experience has made me see how Black women die firsthand in this country. I have received hundreds of letters from women across Louisiana who have had similar experiences, and we know this is happening in states across the country. Because of abortion bans, physicians simply cannot practice medicine based on their training and expertise. We are simply asking for the most basic level of maternal health care, but because of Donald Trump, we are being denied that care. One study found that women living in states that have banned abortion after the overturn of Roe v. Wade are 3 times more likely to die in pregnancy, childbirth, or during the postpartum period. More than a third of all U.S. counties are considered maternity care deserts with no access to vital services. The overturning of Roe v. Wade has made this worse, and we are seeing stories in states across the country from Louisiana to Idaho to North Carolina of physicians leaving their homes and medical students choosing not to practice in those states because of the restrictive laws. But this does not need to happen. What happened to me is not inevitable, and we absolutely can stop it. Donald Trump is responsible for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. He brags about unleashing these extreme abortion bans across the country and calls them a beautiful thing to watch. He has said women should be punished for having an abortion and that states have a right to monitor women's pregnancies to enforce abortion bans. And he has no plans to stop there. Donald Trump says he wants to lead the way in passing a nationwide abortion ban. That means that what I experienced could be happening in all 50 states, including Michigan. My story speaks to the horrors that Donald Trump unleashed the first time he left the Oval Office. Because of him, women like me have suffered. But I'm here today because a second Trump presidency would be far more dangerous, and it terrifies me. We know Donald Trump has plans to abortion nationwide, and that means women in all 50 states would be robbed of their basic health care, their basic access to health care. I know what it feels like to have without that, and I'm here today to make sure that no one has to deal with what I dealt with. That's why I'm doing everything I can to re-elect President Biden and Vice President Harris. I've been traveling across the country speaking out, and I recently shared my story in a TV ad that the Biden-Harris campaign launched this morning. Women's lives across this whole country are at stake, y'all. While Michiganders are proudly pro-choice, with voters passing important protections from reproductive rights in 2022, no one in the state would be safe under a second Trump presidency. The path to the Oval Office runs through Michigan. You all here can make the difference between a national abortion ban and 4 more years of President Biden and Vice President Harris, who are working to restore our freedom. They are leading a whole-of-government effort to protect and strengthen reproductive health care access. And they are fighting to pass federal legislation to restore the protections of Roe v. Wade and to ensure people in every single state, not some, have access to the care that they need. The stakes cannot be higher than this election. It's on all of us to step in for the fight of our lives, our freedoms, because our futures absolutely depend on it. At this time, I'd like to introduce Senator Debbie Stabenow. Senator Debbie has represented Michigan in the United States Senate since 2001. When elected, she became the state's first woman senator. Senator Stabenow cares deeply about health care and helped write the Affordable Health Care Act.
I'm sorry? You have to press hold your button.
Okay.
The whole time you're speaking?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I guess you have to press and hold.
I'll reintroduce her then. Senator Debbie Stabenow has represented Michigan in the United States Senate since 2001. When elected, she became the state's first woman senator. Senator Stabenow cares deeply about health care and helped write the Affordable Health Care Act. I'm happy to present Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you very much, Caitlin. Thank you for coming to Michigan. You're welcome to move here. Actually, we'd love to have you. Yes, exactly. And it's always wonderful to have our second gentleman here, Doug Emhoff, who is coming so much. We're going to give you residency as well because we love having you in Michigan, and of course our wonderful other guests that we're going to hear from today. You know, as Caitlin's talking, it makes me think. This must be 1824, not 2024. It's shocking to me that all of us are gathered here today in Flint, Michigan, and we have to have this conversation. But we do. It's very, very real. The freedoms I have had as an adult woman in the United States have been taken away for my 2 granddaughters. And it is shocking. And we know that Donald Trump is proud of it. That's the part that is even stunning, more stunning to me as we look at what has happened in the last 2 years. And Kane, what happened to you? And that somehow folks think that's okay, which is outrageous. But right now, we have 1 out of 3 women in the United States live in a state with serious abortion restrictions. 1 out of 3. Now, we're lucky in Michigan. We're not one of them. And we worked really hard 2 years ago. A lot of petition signatures, a lot of efforts to get on the ballot, the ability to put into Michigan's constitution our ability to make our own healthcare decisions and really solidify reproductive freedom in Michigan. That's the good news. The great news is also that Governor Whitmer and the state legislature added to that by taking away a lot of restrictions that had been on the books for years, what we call zombie laws that have been out there since the 1800s. That's the good news. Bad news is that the MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump are doing everything humanly possible to strip away what we did. And if Donald Trump is reelected, they will do that. Now, not only will they do that by working to get a national abortion ban, but speaking of zombie laws, there's something called the Comstock Act, which was put in place in 1873, that they are talking about resurrecting so that Trump could actually do a backdoor abortion ban without even going through Congress. So they are laser focused on this. And when we think about what this means in terms of the further implications, they have now, through court decisions and state legislative efforts, begun the process of banning IVF, in vitro fertilization. So if you want a child, you want to start a family or grow your family through IVF, you would be banned from doing that. If you want to take birth control, the right to contraception is now being challenged. And in fact, just to make it clear where the MAGA Republicans and Trump stand, we have put before the United States Senate in the last 2 weeks 2 different bills, one to protect contraception, and almost every Republican voted no. And the second one to protect IVF as an option for people. And almost every Republican voted no on that as well. So they are dead serious about doing everything they can to rip away our capacity to make our own reproductive health decisions. And I think would go even farther in terms of other decisions as well. So here's the good news. The good news is that the Biden-Harris administration believes that these decisions are personal and should be made by the people involved, that the woman makes her own decision, that the person who wants a child makes their own decision. Donald Trump says should be left to the states. We say it should be left to the women who are deciding where and when and how they choose to have children. That is the ultimate in local control, is women controlling their own bodies. And I'm so grateful that since this decision was made 2 years ago, President Biden, Vice President Harris have done everything they can within what they can do to make it clear that it's legal to travel, to make it clear that emergency care should be provided, to make sure they can do everything they can within the parameters. And so now, and I'm going to turn it to our second gentleman who's so wonderful, but now as we sit here today, any day this week, we're going to hear from the United States Supreme Court, another part of the horror show, which is a situation where the Justice Department had to take the state of Idaho to court over the most restrictive kind of abortion ban because they are putting in jeopardy someone to get into the emergency room, to get emergency care under the requirements under Medicare, that people need to be covered for emergency care when they go into the emergency room. It's a law called Antella. And at this point in time, we expect the United States Supreme Court to in some way decide with the state of Idaho and keep what has happened in cases that we know about where women are told, you're not close to death enough, go sit in the car in the parking lot and come back when you're almost dead. And then maybe we can treat you. That's where we are at this point in this country. I am so proud to have a second gentleman in Doug Emhoff, and his wife, my former Senate partner, who I'm so proud is our Vice President of the United States, but totally committed, along with President Biden, totally committed to the notion of freedom, reproductive freedom to make our own choices. And our second gentleman has been traveling all over the country, not only on this, but other really important messages, and none more important than reproductive freedom. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Senator. So great to see you again. I feel like I see you more than Vice President these days. Traveling around to fight for everyone's rights and everyone's freedoms. Caitlin, thank you so much for sharing.
All right.
Is that good? Caitlin, thank you for sharing your story. I just saw the commercial right before I came in. Very powerful, very moving, and completely unnecessary for you and millions of other women to have to almost die to get the care that you need to get. And thanks everyone else for being here. 2 years ago, I got a call from the vice president. She was on Air Force Two. She was angry. She was upset. She was really filled with rage and said to me, Dougie, they actually did it. And we knew this was probably coming because we had the leaked draft decision. But to actually hear it, that the Supreme Court of the United States, which 60 years ago had started a path with Griswold on protecting our rights of privacy, upon which Roe was based, to take this away from you and you and you and my daughter, Ella, for a right that had been on the books for 50 years, just taken away because of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump said infamously during the 26 campaign, women should be punished if they get an abortion. And he ran on overturning Roe. He selected 3 Supreme Court justices who actually looked the Senate Judiciary Committee in the eye and acted like they were going to uphold precedent and said Roe was precedent. Well, that wasn't true. My wife was actually on that committee at the time, so they looked her in the face and said that. And then they took it away. And the first person I heard from was my daughter, who was 23 at the time. And 23-year-olds like my daughter don't text their dads that much. I wish that she did more. But to hear from her, and I went back and looked at it, and it was, I'm angry and I don't want to stand by silently. It's time to fight. It's time to speak out. And you dad need to do something about this. And then shortly thereafter, I heard from my mom, who was 81, now 83. And it's what you said, Senator. It's something like, how is it possible that Ella is going to have less reproductive freedom than me? And mind you, women of her age, or they were out there in the 60s and 70s fighting and marching for equal rights and these Roe protections. And for them to see this taken away is horrific and totally unnecessary. So that's why I have spent the last 2 years, the president, the vice president, the first lady, and the entire administration trying to get the word out that this is completely wrong and that it's not just reproductive freedom that's at stake. Because if you remember what Justice Thomas said in the concurring opinion of Dobbs, it's basically the quiet part out loud. What's next? All these rights that are based on this Griswold right of privacy are now at stake under this Supreme Court, this extreme Supreme Court, which includes contraception. which is also based on that same right of privacy. It includes who you can love, who you can marry. And then if you extrapolate it out with all these fundamental freedoms that are attacked in states, the right to vote, the right to read, the right to even study history, our true history. This is all under attack right now because of Donald Trump. And people need to realize the connection between who is president, who gets on the Supreme Court, and who's in the Senate. That's all connected. We've got an election coming up in 4 months. We've got to reelect President Biden and Vice President Harris because they are committed to your freedom. They're committed to increasing your freedom, not taking it away like the former guy is committed to doing. And he's not hiding it. It's all out there. There's no secret as to what's going to happen if this guy, who was a terrible president the first time, ever gets back. It would be even worse this time, much worse this time. So people need to pay attention to what's going on, pay attention to this election, and then we can avoid what would be your story, Caitlin, and the stories that we've heard around the country happening, but even more so. It's going to be even worse because if they're going to control all the levers of the federal government, they're not going to care one bit about your health, about your freedom, about any of these things. But people need to just pay attention. 4 months, we've got this election, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. And the ultimate goal is, Senator, your colleagues need to do the right thing and respect the will of the American people. The vast majority of the American people believe in freedom and reproductive rights and not having your story happen where you almost died. The vast majority of people do not want that to happen. So we need a Congress that's going to act and codify these rights of privacy, these rights under Roe, so this doesn't happen in the future, so we can move forward. And by the way, this is not just an issue for women. This is an issue for all of us. I talk to my son just as much as I talk to my daughter about this. He's 29, he just got married, and he's starting to think about a family. Well, his wife's from Texas, 6-week ban, criminalizing doctors. Do you think they're going to want to move there right now to start a family? So this is impacting economic freedom, where some of these states with these egregious bans like Louisiana, Texas, Florida, Georgia, where these women can't even get any treatment in their own state if they're past, 6 weeks. You don't even know if you're pregnant at 6 weeks. So where are they going to go? They have to travel. What if they can't take off work? What if they don't have the funds to do that? What if they have other children and they need childcare to do that? This is happening. So these women are likely stuck if they're not able to have the economic resources and the help to get that treatment. So this is all connected. It's not just about abortion. It's about families. It's about our economy. It's about the right thing to do. It's for all of us. And remember, this is all based on a fundamental right of freedom, right of your privacy. So it's not the government in your bedroom, in your medicine cabinet, telling you what to think, what to read. It's outrageous. This is the United States of America. So let's vote. Let's protect our rights. And even here in Michigan, I'm from California, don't get too comfortable. Because if somehow, some way, Donald Trump gets back there, all of the rights here in Michigan, California, and other states are going to be at risk as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for your consistency and your power around this and your voice. We really appreciate it so much. And I want to turn and open it up and just have a little bit more of a discussion and answer questions or ask questions. I'll ask questions. You can answer the questions. But Dr. Aisha Harris, Flint primary care doctor, I was thinking as our second gentleman was speaking about, the size of the room where you do your your visits. I don't know, is it big enough for Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and the Supreme Court just all to be in that room with you when you're talking to somebody? I mean, this is crazy to me that we would say that politicians or judges would be allowed to make decisions for anybody, let alone people they don't even know. But talk for a minute about how this decision 2 years ago has impacted you, what you've seen, and your patients or others. I mean, we are in Michigan, so we're blessed not to have the immediate crisis that Kaysen's talking about. But what are you seeing? What conversations are you having? What is the impact then?
No, process. No, thank you for that question. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this matter because one of the things as a family medicine doctor, as a primary care doctor, I know you're joking about these people being in the patient room, but the most powerful thing that I have with my patients is that trust and that time with them directly to use my resources and my knowledge to provide care. I don't want other people who don't have the medical knowledge, who don't have the medical backing, who haven't went to medical school to be making decisions on how I provide care to my patients and what access they have. And so over the last couple of years, it's been a constant conversation of the people who are having reproductive concerns, reproductive health questions, getting the appropriate access, the appropriate resources, but also the people who are thinking about stuff in the future. Like everyone is scared. Everyone thinks that it's not going to happen to them where they're going to have to make this tough decision, that they're not going to have a miscarriage, that they're not going to have complications. Like things happen every single day. And so the idea of not being able to use modern medicine, like we brag about all the things the United States have done over the years. And if we cannot use that medicine to provide safe and effective care, then what are we doing? But people don't want people who aren't able to understand their medical history, understand their medical concerns, to be making decisions that are supposed to be personal for them and their family. They're supposed to be using their doctors as resources, as assets. And the idea of being afraid to go see your doctor because they might not be able to provide you with the care is something that people are constantly talking about. People are continuing to look for other options. We don't remember the things that people are doing before we created safe medical care. We studied that in medical school, what people are doing before they were able to have antibiotics, to not have infections, to have safe abortion options, safe miscarriage options, safe just medical options in general. And so on my end, as a primary care doctor, I'm afraid of what it will look like if people aren't able to have safe access. But I'm also afraid of what it's going to look like if I'm not able to provide all the knowledge and resources to my patients because of having my hand tied behind my back or feeling like the government is too involved in my patient room when it's supposed to be a personal conversation.
I'm hearing more and more from young people, young women deciding not to have children or even like having their tubes removed or something, which they would never consider before, but they're worried that if they got pregnant and there was an emergency, that they wouldn't be able to get care. Do you find any of those conversations going on with decisions people are considering about not having children, which maybe they never would have had before?
I haven't had the conversation of people as far as having full hysterectomies or fully not being able to have children on a regular basis, but I have people across the country who have a lot of broad women's health experience, a lot of patients that they care for. And one of the challenges they're constantly talking about is the fact that the economic progress and development that we've had in our country is because women have been able to have choices. And so women are doing things in their professional and personal lives that impact them, impact their families. And the idea of restricting themselves or going for a decision that they didn't really quite want because of their fear is not going to turn out well for their families and themselves, as well as for our economy in general.
Well, let me ask Shanae Whitaker. Thank you for all of your work in the campaign for reproductive rights for all. As we talk about this conversation of Donald Trump being reelected and a national abortion ban, what does that mean to you, the impact of that?
Thank you, Senator Stabenow. Thank you, second gentleman. I think about my children. I have children ages 27, 26, 25, 25, 24, and 24.
Oh my God, you've been busy.
Well, you know what? I think about them daily in the work that I do every day. My youngest son, of course, is serving honorably in the United States Navy. I think about my 4 girls. They're my oldest children. I think about what their life was like if we did not pass Proposal 3, if we did not have Governor Whitmer and the trifecta here in Michigan, if we did not have the Reproductive Health Act that was passed in 2023. They would have had less rights than me. That's not a world that I want them to live in. We here, as activists, as organizers, we think about making sure the world that we leave is better than what we got here. And I can't imagine us going back to a place where they have less rights than I did, going back to a place where I know across the country, 21 states, they have lost access to reproductive care. I don't want to go back to that. As a mom, I appreciate the work that you've done. I've appreciated the work that the administration has done to protect my daughters. And it's important that we elect President Biden and Vice President Harris, because this is about their future, my girls' future. And I don't want them to feel like they're a second-class citizen again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We don't want that to happen either. And if we all work really hard and everybody really gets out and votes and does what we should, that's not going to happen. We don't have to worry about that. Julia Walters, Julia Walters, yes, a Michigan law student, actually Michigan State law student, go green. And so, so you've just finished first year law school, and you're now in this world where, we are talking about national abortion bans, and MAGA Republicans, as well as former President Trump, are talking about limiting your choices on birth control or IVF. And so what does all this mean to you as a young woman now being confronted with all of the impact of this?
Yes, first off, I just want to say thank you again to the second gentleman, and again to you for sharing your story, and to you, Senator Stabenow, and to both of you for the work that you do. For me, as a student applying to law school, one of the things that I considered most dominantly being a young woman in a post-Dobbs era was avoiding any states that had threatened to remove my reproductive freedom. That is the reason that I chose to pursue my law school degree in the state of Michigan, was because we had passed Prop 3 and codified reproductive freedom into our state constitution. Mm-hmm. And so as I think about myself continuing into my professional life, there are several regions for me that are off limits because I want to be able to live my life autonomously and not have to be burdened or concerned additionally with the fact that I might not be able to get care, should I need it. And I know it's been the same thought process for my peers and both of my younger sisters as well. My younger sister applied to college, and she had the same thought process as I did. Certain states were off limits. And so I think, again, it's just fundamental that we continue to fight, and young people work hard to fight for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to be reelected, because we know the alternative with Donald Trump is not an option. There would no longer be safe states. We would all be under the threat of a national impending abortion ban.
Well, thank you, Julia. It's stunning when you think about the fact that when you're deciding where to go to college, go to law school, you now factor in what states protect your reproductive freedoms. That's really stunning. I'm hearing the same thing from businesses who are deciding where to locate. I'm sure you have as well, Doug. And also from people who decide whether or not to work for a business. Not wanting to go to Louisiana, not wanting to go to Texas, not wanting to go to Florida, because they want to have a family. And what does that mean for all of us? Yeah. Yes.
Doctor, thank you. I've heard from doctors around the country who are leaving states, leaving the profession even, Can you talk about the impact on your profession? I know you said it's hard to practice at the highest level when you're not able to use all the modern tools that are at your disposal. But just what has this done to the medical profession, and what will it do to the medical profession going forward?
No, that's a very good question. When Julie was talking about her experience in applying to law school, I just think about the people I know applying to medical school, the people who are looking at residencies, which is the training you do after medical school. And so that's just the beginning of our healthcare doctor workforce. And so those people are also deciding what states would be the best as far as their training, will give them the most kind of experience. But on the other end, when people aren't considering working in a state, that means that their health access is going to dwindle. That means that the people who were in those communities that had, not as many doctors or needed those people who are in those training programs to care for their patients, if they aren't going there, then there's going to be a huge access gap. As far as people thinking about the long-term effect of not being able to practice medicine, it gets frustrating when you have the inability to work in your full capacity. And so I do see people having that discussion about leaving, about being able to go to a state where they know they can have a broad coverage. But again, if they leave, that means that that state that they're leaving doesn't have that care. And so it is a chain reaction.
I will add the vice president was the first president or vice president to visit a Planned Parenthood facility. That was in Minnesota. And a lot of these facilities are closing around the country. And as the vice president mentioned, these are not just abortion clinics. These are healthcare clinics, contraception, pap smears, or just routine health care. So now women are being denied routine health coverage. That where are they going to get that coverage now in these states? So it has just a perverse impact, jobs that we're not just talking about abortion. We're talking about overall medical care. We're talking about the medical profession, and we're talking about our economy. Look at what this is going to do if people are going to refuse to go to certain states or leave. It's just outrageous, and it's got to change. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris.
Thank you. And as we wrap up, and I'm looking here for a cue. I don't see any cues from anyone here how we're doing on time. So, but as we wrap up, let me not only underscore what the second gentleman said about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but we have a special responsibility in Michigan for folks to understand, despite all the wonderful work we did 2 years ago, and it was such a celebration. People came out to vote. People stood in long lines. Yes. And on election day, well past midnight, people were voting, which was wonderful. The problem is this will all get ripped away. If Donald Trump comes back into office. That's the reality for us. So we feel like we're safe right now, and I'm proud of everything that was done, but we have to one more time, we got to make sure we are protecting our state's constitution and our freedoms by getting out to vote. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Great.
No, thank you all.
Right.
Outside with the senator and our other roundtable participants. My colleague Bobby, waving his hand over there, will help you get set up and we're at the proper location.